Thank you very much, Eric, and welcome everyone to our little panel. Yay! Yay! Thank you for coming. We are going to run probably like 40 minutes, maybe 30, 40 minutes of conversation. We'll see where it takes us, and then we'll open up to Q&A. This is supposed to be very casual, very conversational, and supposed to be fun. So I'll just start with introductions. My name is Cassidy Pearsall. I am an application engineer with Arri Solutions based out of Burbank, California. Previously with Disguise Media Servers. Get a shout out for Disguise. Yeah. And I work on our solutions team. I help create new workflows and find new workflows for Arri products in virtual production applications. And we have a stacked panel here with us today. We have Sam Slade from Voluminous. Woo! I'm going to let you guys do intros after I say all your names. We have Sarah Thomas Moffat, freelance DP and camera op and gaffer extraordinaire. She does it all. And then finally, on the end, we have JT Rooney, president of XR Studios. President, big title. So how about you guys give a little bit of a spiel about each of your respective companies and maybe how you got into VP in the first place?
All right, I guess I'll go first. Yes, so as Cassie said, my name is Sam Slade. I work for a company called Voluminous Studios. We're based out of Santa Monica in beautiful Southern California. And our company sort of has three pillars of virtual production. So the first is actual production. So we help do integrations and solutions and engineering and building for different stages all over the world. We also do research and development, so develop new technologies and workflows for our clients. And the last is education. We really want to build an education platform for this because it's a huge gap in the industry right now, finding operators, finding people who understand this. So that's something that we're really focusing on. And I got into virtual production at the start of the pandemic. Over 2 years ago. That's crazy to think about now. Within a year of getting into it, we had almost 120 days of shoot under our belt, which made our stage like one of the most worked stages. It was a stage that we built in San Francisco, one of the most worked stages in the world at the time, which is crazy to think about now, but we've come a long way since back then.
Hi, I'm Sarah Thomas Moffat. I am a cinematographer. I am a gaffer. I have operated camera a lot. I've been in the film industry, based out of Toronto mostly, then Vancouver over 25 years. And so short story, virtual production. I've always been interested in digital technology. I had an Atari when I was a kid. That's where it kind of started. As soon as I saw how, actually, it was before The Mandalorian was being made, it was Cavalia. Cavalia is a horse acrobatic show that is an extension of the Cirque du Soleil series, and I love horses. And so I went to see Cavalia, and when I saw that stage move, that my mind just blew. Like, that's really where that curiosity started. And also in filmmaking in general. I'm always interested in technology, the big picture, advancing, what's new, all that kind of fun stuff. So really, this is an extension and a growth of that. I'm also very grateful to be here, so thanks everybody. And I'm just excited to get this conversation going.
Super cool. That horse show is amazing. Everyone always talks about it. So I started in a path in motion graphics for live shows and events. So I work with a content company called Silent Partners Studio. So a lot of my background is making all the pretty pictures for the giant screens in shows like Cavalli and stuff like that. And so that background really led in a nice way into virtual production, as we've been working with real-time entertainment and real-time rendering for a long time for musical performances. XR Studios started right around the same time when you were playing in San Francisco as well. Right in the beginning of the pandemic, we did a piece with Katy Perry for American Idol that kind of really was at this perfect moment of the week before. I think it was the Rolling Stones playing out of their living room on Zoom, and then we were the next thing after that. So it was this perfect moment of like production quality during a really hard time. So it really just took it to a nice place, and we wanted to create a space that was specifically trying to be in between the creative and the pure technology. We wanted to be a group of people who help make all of this possible in the right amount of time without stressing the client with, hey, how do cameras work? Like, we want to take that load off of people. So we have a stage in Hollywood, and we're building a new facility in Hollywood that's going to have 2 volumes open in October. So exciting times.
All right. Okay, this works now. Thank you very much. Well, so to our panel, I thought I would ask a couple of kind of softball questions just about the industry. And then I have a couple of reels from a test shoot that we've done in our Burbank stage at Arri, one of which Sarah came and helped us out with in the Unreal 5 City Matrix scene. And then I think once we play the reels, we can start talking about maybe the technology. The purpose of this panel, or what I would really like to kind of dig into, is what are all of the little niche extra little bits, the things people overlook when they're not, watching videos on LinkedIn of successful stages, and they're just seeing the magic and they're seeing that anything is possible. What are the little things that might get missed, or the little finishing touches that you might overlook when trying to actually get something photorealistic or stylized? So I'm going to start off with I'm going to skip this first one because we kind of just addressed it, but what were some of the initial most common questions that you guys were receiving for clients, or that you had about virtual production when you were first investigating it for your own use?
Sure. I think my path with virtual production has been kind of long, so I'm trying to figure out, it's evolved so much over the last couple of years for all of us, right? So some of the first conversations from our perspective came from a live performance. It's more of what our focus is in. So it's how do we do this live on screen? And actually, for me, that first conversation was during the halftime show with Katy Perry. Remember the Left Shark sort of thing? That was a big projection map show with Disguise, D3 at the time. And it was 80 projectors, and it had to look right from cameras. So we were rendering it all from one angle so that it looked nice on camera. And we went down this really dark path for probably 3 days of trying to pre-render all of the camera shots ahead of time. So like if we did the cut and line up with the Steadicam, and on that scale it was just too much. But that really planted a seed in 2014 or whatever of like, this needs to be something that's more accessible for live. And again, just being selfish about my background, that led into a bunch of other different things. So the conversation always started with me and my clients, and what we do as a company is, what do you actually want to do? What do you want to achieve? And we really try to push people into that, because when something is new like this technology, the temptation is like, oh, I just want to do this because I heard it's cool. It's like, well, what are you trying to do here? And sometimes the answer is like, oh, this is totally great. And sometimes their answer is like, oh, no, you need to go to the beach and film this in the ocean because that's what you really want to do, sort of a thing. So I think the conversation nowadays starts very differently than it used to. But nowadays it's much more, how much does it cost for your wall for the day? I want to be there for 15 minutes, and I saw online that this is easy and quicker, cheaper, better, sort of a thing. So it's just a lot of client education, basically, walking them through the whole process.
Yeah, that was a huge thing that we saw. Like the first project that we ever did in VP, we were like, we want to make this look as realistic as possible. And like, you'd seen all the videos online and all this, and it's like, oh yeah, you just download Unreal Engine and like it looks gorgeous and it looks perfect. And it's like, no, that's not the case at all. Like it's an incredibly powerful tool, and you can make it do that, but it's not as simple as it seems. So yeah, it was a lot of like client education and like telling people like there's a huge amount of work that does have to go into this. We put hundreds of hours into our first couple of asset sets because we were modeling everything from scratch. We were doing all the lighting in Arnold and then exporting the textures and putting them as a missive in Unreal. So we weren't even using Unreal's lighting system. And like that was the only way we could really get to that like hyper realistic image for this first shoot that we had promised the client. And we got there at the end of the day, and it looked great, and it's still some of my favorite stuff that I've shot in virtual production, but it was not efficient or sustainable. So we had to find other solutions and other workarounds for future shoots. But yeah, that's a big one, is like setting your expectations and letting the client know like what is possible with your time and your budget and your resources.
From a cinematography perspective, the evolution and discussion on our side was lighting, key lighting, next lensing, and the behavior of a lens, but also the behavior of the lighting. And you can see in earlier blockbuster films, for example, where not necessarily using a virtual production screen or VR or XR, they're using mostly green screen, but they're then CGing in the background of outer space or something like that. The lighting is completely different in outer space than it is on the actor who's on a rocket ship being blown out to bits or something like that. And you can just Google that stuff and you can see keyframes constantly, looking like lighting's matched or not matched. Now, in a blockbuster film, when you have an audience of mostly maybe young people that are just there for the ride, they're not really catching that stuff. But as professionals, all of us are catching that stuff, which is why I love, people like this, because we are pushing those boundaries to marry those two worlds so that they can become more flawless together. And so for me, lighting was a really big thing, and we'll touch more on that technology too.
Yeah, so part of the reason that I wanted to bring this group together was because we have a really diverse set of opinion and positions on a set. So I want to ask first JT and Sam, how are conversations changing with creatives, cinematographers, directors, from the first few days of doing VP to now? Like, how do you prepare them before they come to set? What are some of the questions you ask them about what they want to achieve? And what is some of the information you give them to allow them to understand what is flexible and what is fixed on set?
I've found it's... It really is. You just have to have conversations with them before your shoot even starts. Like from the second that your content creation starts, you want to be asking them as many questions as possible. Like, do you want to be able to change lighting on set? Do you want to be able to change your set dressing on set of your background? Like, you just need to know their flexibility level and how much they want to manipulate. Because especially with 3D, content, you do have to lock in some things in order to get the quality of the level or the expectation that they want. And it's really, communicating the limitations to them, like not overselling it and saying like, oh, it can do this and this and this, because that'll just get you into trouble at the end of the day. So be realistic about what you can and can't achieve, and you're going to set yourself up for success. And it really is just a time thing. Like every time we've brought a new director on set, it is an education thing. Like, hey, these are limitations. This is how much time it's going to take. And most of the time they're very, very understanding. Most of the time they come in with very low expectations, and we're normally able to exceed it, which is great, and it's a great feeling. And it depends on the director you're working with too. Like, we've had some difficult directors who are very demanding and have caused us a lot of pain. But it's it's doing your best to manage it and give them the best possible image.
I think it's similar paths. It's funny to hear the people talk about your shared experiences, but I think the director and the DP are these huge forks in the road at the very beginning of a project for a lot of what's happening. It's right away, it's it's a buy-in or it's a non, and then if it's not, it's like, how do you get them to a yes? How do you educate in a way that makes sense? Because it's really unfair, especially with our stage. We do a lot of augmented reality as well, and the more digital stuff that we add, it takes away more tools that a DP is used to being able to use. If you change a lens, that means a lot more now if you're trying to do digital set extension and color and blah, 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 blah. If you're shooting in the volume, that is okay, it's actually more options there. So there's a lot of really interesting paths we talk about with forks in the road at an early stage. I think something that you touched on as well is that this is real-time rendering and real-time iteration and real-time editing, but it's not real-time design. You can't change this rock into an elephant with one button unless you have that elephant ready to go. But if you have it ready to go, you can switch back and forth all day. Like, that's very cool, So it's really setting up the conversation about how do you create an environment where we can iterate and tweak and explore based off of a set of known parameters. But then with some clients, like you were saying as well, it's hard to say maybe to a DP or to a director and say, what all are you going to want to do on the shoot that day? Because sometimes there's like, I don't know, like there's so many things there, and if they haven't known the technology. So for me, a lot of this is based off of time, and it depends on what kind of shoots you're doing. So I work a lot in, if I'm doing live stuff or in like single camera production, commercial shoots or whatever, very short timelines. Pre-production is short, the actual shooting time is short, 2 to 3 day shoots, 1 day shoots, 10 day shoots at the most for me. When I talk with Phil from Lux, for example, if he's doing a 6-week film shoot, they're just going to take 3 days to like, okay, let's wade into this together and talk about this stuff. And for some of these shoots, you just don't have that time. So you do have to kind of pick and choose a little bit. And for us, we actually lock off a lot of stuff because we are this sort of full production model. And that's really hard for a DP sometimes. But it's for this overall greater good of the shoot. Like, what are the things we want to go, what are the paths we want to go down, and what are the things we want to maybe avoid because of the time and the budget that we have.
So, Sarah, I kind of wanted to ask the same question, maybe from the other angle. As a cinematographer, what are some of the decisions that you might have already, you know, maybe not decided, but you have floating around in your head? What are the things that you're really focused on trying to get out of a shot? Is it something like the lighting setup? Is it more like the mood? Is it more abstract like that? What do you think would be helpful to bring to this conversation days or weeks in advance of preparing the set and preparing the content?
Yeah, absolutely, great question. Definitely mood, like if, you know, collaborating with the director, specifically in narrative, you know, mood and tone is everything. So what story are you trying to tell? You can shoot the same shot 5 different ways and it tells a different story every time. So you have to get really clear on that in pre-production, absolutely. And that boils also down to lighting and lensing. So when you get into those aspects, when you're dealing with virtual production, you're getting into the lighting, and we'll talk about this when you show the clips, of actually the light moving inside the virtual production, not on the floor. And a lot of people are, you know, sort of getting their brain to switch to this virtual world is a challenge. And it will come if they're interested in it, and it won't come if they're not interested in it. If it won't come, then you waste time. And that goes for directors, production designers, DPs, producers, everybody, right? So for me personally, my approach is, because I love technology, I've done a lot of work with green screen. I used to do a lot of underwater cinematography as well. Also as a technician, where I would build rigs on hotheads and hand them off to divers or put them on cranes and put them in water. I knew how to talk to other technicians to get the job done, and I knew how to talk to and listen to a director and another cinematographer's concerns of what they're doing. So it really takes a unique brain to marry all of that, I think. And I mean, I'm pleased with the, you know, career path that I've had to do that, and I'm excited about what's to come. But those solutions must happen, and the conversations must happen in pre-production. And all of those aspects, from lighting to lensing to mood to tone, need to come up as early as possible.
Yeah, I was going to add as well, like, our most productive day is our pre-light day before the shoot. Like, we very, very quickly were like when we first started, we were like, oh, you know, if you don't have the budget or the time for a pre-light, you know, we'll make it work. But we very quickly were like, yeah, you're doing a pre-light. You're like, we're going to force everyone to do it, because that is when you can really refine your tone and your mood and test your content, your blocking, your lighting. And it's just so, so valuable.
And you work it out without other people breathing down your neck in the room.
Exactly, yep.
So I think this is a good opportunity. I have a couple of clips of some test shoots, like I said, and I'm going to just let them, they don't have audio or anything. So I think we should just talk over them and have them in the background. The first one I'm going to do is the Matrix Unreal City scene that my colleague Andrew George from Arri Solutions de-gamified. I don't know if anyone's downloaded it yet and played the game. It's a really great callback to Grand Theft Auto, in my opinion. But just showing a little bit about what we kind of have going on. This is featuring our Burbank stage at Arri. We have a sky panel array of S60s, about 35 in the sky, and a couple of orbiters. This is a very simple lighting setup, but just as my little plug.
Can you guys see that behind us?
Yeah, is this all right? You see?
That's on over
Okay,
there.
cool. What we have, what we offer from Arri Solutions is we have a metadata plugin for our products, as well as any cameras utilizing the UMC4 that will allow real-time metadata related to zoom, lens, and our metadata plugin is available free online right now, and it will work over SDI relay from any Arri camera, or with our UMC4 accessory will work with other cameras as well. So that will allow you to adjust the zoom, focus, and iris within the Unreal environment in time, with as if it's not there, and allow it to pass through the environment. What we've also done here is we've plugged in the intensity. This is me as the actress, by the way. We've plugged in the intensity in this scene to our sky panel array, so we can try and more convincingly convey shadows as we move throughout the environment. We just have one S60 as front light here, and in the next clip that I'm going to show you, we're going to show you the color integration as well, which is all featuring our sky panels and orbiters. And at the end of this clip, we're going to show some of our touch shoot with the same asset that we did with Sarah a couple of weeks ago, which was a really illuminating experience for me, getting to approach this with an actual cinematographer in the room, because I've been working for manufacturers for quite a while. I've been working with technicians and developers, and it's very different when you have creatives in the room when you're problem solving. You think a lot more about how each of those things impacts each other rather than it is a step-by-step process A to B. It kind of feels a lot more like a circle. So I really liked using this asset. Another thing I wanted to talk about with you guys is actual optimization of assets. As you can see, there's a bit of stuttering in the background just because this is truly, it's a great but very massive asset. So on our system, it has some performance issues as well. We also have plugged in the web API, so we have control like exposure of the scene, color, temperature. We have the speed of the clouds. We actually smashed in the ultra dynamic sky marketplace asset. If anyone's looking for a great little, I think it's like $40 or something like that, sky simulator. And that allowed us to do things like sunset, change time of day. And yeah, it's a really great kind of little setup here. This was really playtime for us. We have fun doing these kinds of things, and we like to invite people to our space for test shoots and for getting people familiar, like client education, like we've been saying, a fun, casual, not scary place where you can actually try and play with the technology before having to go on set for however many thousands of dollars a day. And here's our shot with Sarah. She brought in her motorcycle.
So I convinced them to let me ride my motorcycle in to the studio, which I rode down from Vancouver, Canada to Los Angeles. And it was awesome because we had an afternoon to play with this engine and light from the floor. And what I asked, these are some rehearsal shots to try a moving city, various lighting setups, just to see how the city and the lensing reacts. There's all kinds of technical things going on here, but this was more of a static shot with a little bit of a camera move. What's interesting to me about this is I wanted to create something a little sexy, moody, sunset. And Andrew, the technician at Arri, and I moved the engine around with Cassidy, and I just looked at the city. It was just this floating space. And he could spin it around like this, 360 upside down, anywhere I wanted to look at it. And I said, okay, that part over there, that docking part over there, where's that? And it looked like Manhattan, like way out, where the docks are and the concrete ends. And I said, okay, let's fake a sunset over there. And so I'm, like Cassidy's saying, I'm speaking from a lighting perspective and a mood perspective. I said, take all the lighting in the asset down to sunset. And there's a pinhole in the asset where the world comes together. And I said, can we use that as the sun? It wasn't really the sun. You can put the sun anywhere. But I faked that as a sun. And then what Andrew was able to do was actually move the sunset kick off of the world and put it on the concrete and line it up where I lit from the floor to hit me in the bike, so that it matched. So if you went back to that clip and paused it, you could see and examine the picture of this. It looks like the sun's coming off the atmosphere, hitting the concrete, coming up, and then my lighting from the floor is matching that and hitting the subject. That for me is achievement. That's success. And that's how we communicate on the floor. And it's a simple way of communicating, but it's amazing how difficult it is for a lot of people to actually not touch things and just want to grab things and move them for DPs and directors, where I'm more, you got to learn to use your big words, folks,
Yeah, one of the most interesting aspects to me was the virtual location scouting. And I have a question for JT and Sam, like how early in a process might you bring a client in? Are clients generally bringing bespoke assets that they have created, or are you working with content creators to make one and then doing that location scouting with the client and helping find those exact angles, that exact mood? What's kind of more common, I guess?
For us, it's a little bit different. Again, our niche is a little bit more in live entertainment, and so a lot of times it's a music performance or it's a whole weird, fantastical world for one song, and it's something completely different. there's still this whole process that has to happen with that, just like a physical shoot, because it's about the mood and it's the experience and stuff like that. So we actually don't make the content in-house. We partner with other people, but we have a template process and a workflow process where we share sort of workflow with people. We give them tips and tricks, and they give us their scene on Perforce, and we're like, hey, your scene's upside down, and try change this, and look at this tree, it needs to be optimized, like that sort of stuff. So I think that's what's really interesting, is going through that process with someone and talking with them about previs and talking with them about those location scouts, because it is expensive to be on these stages and to take the time and stuff like that. So whatever you can do ahead of time really matters. But what we've been doing in our stage, which is probably similar to what Sam's doing and your team is doing as well, is like, we want to give people tools so that they can have that playtime and iteration as well. Like, yes, make a plan, yes, make it work. But if we need to move the world at 5 degrees to the right to make that shot totally right, that's what filmmaking is about. It's always about, Hollywooding something into place and holding it, or, doing a weird rig with duct tape just to make it happen. We want to have that same sort of feel in a virtual space. So give people tools to do those sort of things that is not, like you said, scary, or someone doesn't have the language to do it. We want people to say, hey, can that big rock be over there? And like, yeah, let's move the rock, let's do that, and make sure that we're set up in a way to do that sort of stuff. So I think our production schedules are shorter than a long film, or, whatever, like I said earlier. So if we're doing a 4 to 6 week lead time, sometimes it's not very long, but sometimes that's what's happening. We're encouraging previs from the very beginning. So we let people see our actual stage layout. Our cameras are in the scene with the right, sensor size, and here's the lensing. And like, from the very beginning, it's about what is this actually going to look like, because it's virtual. So, it actually, does actually play pretty well when you get into the space in terms of what you're expecting. What you see is what you get for a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, the very last project I worked on, it was a director DP who had a background in media servers and in 3D. So I just sent him the Unreal file, and I was like, here, have fun, like open it up, play around with it, which was super nice. And you can't expect that. That was a very rare occurrence. But I've actually had really good luck with, like once we've generated the assets and we have it in a really good spot, is like hopping on a Zoom call with them and sharing your screen and being like, hey, let's go through and like place these cameras, like, rough it out. We'll create, and like we can sometimes create the, previs and the shot list from that, or at least a rough one for them to go on to set with. And that's been super, super useful. So, I mean, it's nothing high tech, but it works and it's really effective. And then in terms of like generating the content, if you are generating content from scratch, you would start with some sort of artwork or inspiration to start from, and then you would build your bespoke asset from there. But a lot of the time, you're taking marketplace assets, so you're taking stuff that already exists and you're modifying that. So that's where it's like you can just download the asset as it is and show it to them and get their initial impressions. Like, do they hate it? Do they want to change everything about it, or do they just want to make some little tweaks here and there? So that's been really, that's been the most common workflow for us, at least, is taking existing assets, at least to start with. And, sometimes we do end up ripping the whole thing apart and it's basically starting from scratch, but you at least have something right off the bat. You don't have to spend a month or two building up from nothing to get initial impressions for a scene.
I think something that's interesting about that too, you touched on with the DP and the shot viz and the previs, is that getting the cinematographer on from the very beginning is different now. Like, obviously everyone should be doing pre-pro whenever you're doing any sort of shoot, but it is more common to be brought on a bit later sometimes as a cinematographer than you would like. Now you can't really have that person show up on the day and be like, all right, what are we doing? Like, you really have to bring them on. So even from a business or a financial standpoint, now there's a new line item of like pre-pro for the cinematographer. Like, that's a new thing that is a little bit different in this, just like anything else. So I think that's really interesting, is getting those people on board, showing them the tools. And even if they don't know Unreal or, Unity or whatever, I think we are getting closer and closer to the point where you can make a tool set for someone who doesn't know that stuff, and they can drive around with an Xbox controller or whatever it is, use their own their own wheels or whatever to explore. Like, that's becoming really interesting as well, I think, for sure.
All right, so I'm going to show our next clip now. We can talk a little bit more about lighting, but I'm really enjoying kind of this conversation of this handoff between technicians and the creative team. So when this one plays, this is Unreal 4.27. This is the Cyber City marketplace asset that our friends at ICVR helpfully prepared for us for our stage, and we've shown at several of these various trade shows that we've done. So this we just did last week. We did a much more intense lighting setup here. You can see I have an orbiter being shown in a lovely B-roll shot. This was our final
You're
shot.
in all of this footage. It's great. It's
yeah,
very
because
exciting.
it's just me and Andrew in that room. So, and he doesn't like to be on camera. So we shot this on an Arri LF. We used a 45 to 135 signature zoom for this, which was really nice. Our previous shots with Sarah, we did use the zoom lens, but with those ones of just me, we just used a 58 millimeter. And this one, we did a really nice job, I think, of actually localizing the lights within the Unreal scene and pixel mapping them. This is a really great asset to do that with because you can actually attach it to certain areas of the scene where those will actually be flashing based on the different neon lights. And it gives a much more realistic impression. Later in this clip, I have some footage from the HPA trade show that we did in February of a couple of different assets bringing in that color information as well, where it was more generalized. It was all top light, and you can kind of see the disconnect a bit more. This one, we had many lights on the ground. We had L7s in the back. Right after this shot, I go into kind of our lighting focus and how we determined those angles. But I think that that is a really, it's not that it's overlooked, but that it's still, I guess I want to say, left to the last minute sometimes in pre-lit of actually trying to figure out those angles and taking the time with the lighting designer to come up with the most convincing angles as things would reflect off of the ground, as things would reflect off pools of water. And this was a really eye-opening experience for me because this scene is so bright. And when we were doing the movement through the alleyway, it changes so much. And I think that we came up with a really nice example shot for what we want to do. Please excuse me chewing bubblegum in there as well, but it was a
Very
long day and I
professional.
really needed it. So.
Yeah, something about the DMX lighting that we realized very quickly is like when you want to sample light and have it be reproduced by like sky panels or any RGB light, is you want to actually sample what the light would reflect off of instead of the actual color of the light itself. So instead of like sampling the color of the sky, you want to sample the color that the sky is reflecting. So you would what we end up having to do is put white cards around in our Unreal scene and sample the color that those reflect from the entire environment and use those for lighting. It's just one of those weird things that you don't think about until you do it and you're like, oh, that looks wrong. Why does it look wrong? And you realize that you're sampling the wrong color. It was an interesting problem.
There's just a comment on this. It looks really cool, by the way. If anyone's looked at the new film called Gray Man on, I think it's Netflix. So I was studying how that was shot recently, and there's a huge, awesome fight scene in the beginning of the film, and the background for the fight scene is this like huge window of a big fancy restaurant, and there's fireworks going on outside. So I listened to the production designer and DP talk about how they made it. And they basically, on the note of where virtual production could come in to make things more cost-effective, is they painted that in. So for lighting cues, because the lighting was very similar on colors and stuff like that, the room was very colorful, the fireworks were all different colors. So how do you get this huge fight scene going on in this room and all these kicks of light going off of these people's faces and keep the mood and keep the shadow and keep the tone? But you're painting in the background and it's against a big green screen, right? Well, what they did was they created fake LED trees. Well, they created LED trees with, rainbow lighting effect, and they put them through the set. And so they had half a set, half a green screen section, and then they put these LEDs in, and then they ran the whole fight scene and everything. And of course, they did an epic color grade on it as well. But they also painted in all the fireworks. They painted in everything that was going on at the window, and they painted out the LED trees that were reflecting the light onto all of the actors and stuff. Now, they were able to match it. The cost of that in post-production is millions of dollars. So can you do that in something like virtual production? Yes, absolutely. You can create that world. You can create those fireworks, and you can run a scene like that against a giant screen and do it in a controlled environment with LEDs coming from the floor, with actions like that, right? So it just, getting into the cost point, sure, you have to develop the background, you have to develop the asset, but over time, I think in a series versus a feature, if you're doing a series that's consecutive seasons and you have multiple shots in a location, you've created the asset once. And then you can reuse the asset. You know what it is. You know how to control it. You know how to light from the floor. And then if you have car scenes, for example, or you have motorcycle scenes or travel scenes, and there's another pandemic, you can shoot all of that in studio. And you can do a lot of stunt work more safely with those assets and controlled lighting than you can, in a real world environment. So you kind of have to weigh out your costs there. I've listened to, and talked to a lot of, VFX guys who've been doing union work in Los Angeles for decades, and they've worked a lot, most of their stuff on green screen. Awesome, very talented blockbuster movie guys, right? They like virtual production, but they also feel that sometimes productions, for the speed of things, are still bumping into green screen because it's a panic button. So I think the more this develops and the more we have these conversations and the more we fine-tune this and make it more of a comfort zone for production, the more it will change over, because it's already had success on things like The Mandalorian. I think the other big thing I wanted to comment on is that it gives actors a space to be in that feels real. So it becomes emotional for directors and actors to make it more believable, to make those performances more grounded. And then, yes, the little lighting cues become more realistic as well. I find talking to actors who work on stages with these things in sets and in their costumes, they get to feel more real in those environments, like walking into a house or something, versus standing in front of a green screen for a 30-day shoot. And they have to invent the entire location in their mind with emotion. And everything's just bright and green. And then everything else is painted in. I think the performance difference is worth the virtual production asset.
This is not just for generating final pixels. This is for, like you said, for reference and any big blockbuster, I don't think you can expect to get final pixel out of it. I think that's pretty unrealistic, at least for the long term. But it's certainly an extremely valuable tool.
I think what you said too, the performance side of it, is we always joke at the studio that it's getting rid of like the weatherman problem. Like, just, hey, please act, just cry right now and look into the distance. And it's like, oh, it's a green screen. It's really hard to do that. So we, totally agreed on that point. I think the other thing too, watching back all these amazing bloopers and everything else that's happening too, something that I appreciate with talking with the cinematographer about it or gaffers or anything like that, is that I do think something kind of happened early on with this technology, and maybe this is a bit of a hot take, but I think a lot of people are also really relying heavily on the LED to do all of the work. And people rely on the LED ceiling and say like, oh, just load the scene and you're done. And you have to craft the image as you do anything. So you need hard sources sometimes. You need bounce. You need a weird neon thing in the background that an LED is not built to do all of that. It is amazing for wrapping light around people's face and to make a very shiny Mandalorian guy reflect well. Like, all those initial reasons still hold true, but watching this and seeing how people are all growing with it, I think it's really interesting. So our stage doesn't have a ceiling. We'll put one in when we need it, but we have different needs because, again, if it's more live, you don't need that. But even for cinematic stuff, talking with a lot of people around the world, it's interesting to find that because this is growing so fast, a lot of people just dive right into it and then realize that they're taking out a third of their ceiling and adding all these hard points and all this sort of DMX controllable stuff, and you need that repeatability. So I think it's been really interesting to watch how that's kind of changing in the next phase of this, in the next year or whatever, to see where that sort of truth lies. Like what Arri's done with sky panels and pixel mapping, or like what the Quasar Science guys did at Cinegear, was incredible. Like really, really harsh, but still like soft point lights, like really clever stuff. So I think there's a lot of room to grow still in all of that.
And everything you guys are doing with like augmented reality and set extension, that's a whole nother layer on top of this that's super fascinating to someone, coming from my side where we don't do that. That's another element of complexity.
I think it's an unfair thing too sometimes, because with augmented reality you can do all this stuff, but then it's not necessarily the same final pixel quality as a blockbuster film, right? And so there's a trade-off there somewhere. But if you can accept that trade-off, when it comes to lighting, for example, we can put an orbiter right next to someone on stage and we'll block it out with AR when we do our shoots. So all of a sudden you cut to a wide shot and that light's still there. That's amazing. We can hide props. We can all of a sudden make 50 people appear. Like, that's a really interesting tool, but we're only able to do that if everyone is on board from the beginning that this is an augmented reality, with a capital A sort of shoot. So I think it'll be interesting to see where the truth lies in the middle. Maybe that happens during the shoot process, and then in post it's, a different thing. Or like a lot of people are working with like shoot quality versus render quality and stuff like that. But I think just looking at all the different tools and putting together is what's interesting right now.
You can section it too. I was going to say, just to add to that, you can also section VR, like virtual production screens, around green screen. So say you have like a large environment that you're just going to paint in the CG world of Wakanda. But you can have a section like this behind the actors, and then around that can be green screen sections, or wherever you need them. Say you're on location and you bring in something like this, or you have a green screen section over here. There's a way to do it. Like, there's all kinds of ways. I think the biggest thing is that you have to expand your mind to actually just think more creatively.
And going back to the tools of DPs and gaffers and whatever, this should all be a solution to a problem, not just like, hey, just come in here and it works perfectly. You should change it to what you need it to be, for sure.
Yeah, use it for the right reason. Don't just use it because it's cool and you want to.
But it is cool. It's very
It is
exciting.
very cool.
Okay, so we have time for a couple of questions from the audience if anybody is dying to go for it. Speak now or forever hold your peace. No, I guess not.
Can I ask my own question
Yes,
to Sam
exactly.
and to everyone
Yes,
else?
I
We were
would love
talking,
that.
like the prompt of the piece was a bit about like the challenges of volume control and like the challenges of this. And I think you mentioned it already, and we've all been talking about like marketing as we're sitting around. A lot of marketing is obviously a good and a bad thing. Like everyone, we're all here because of it. But sometimes the appearance is that it's amazing and it's perfect and all stuff like that. Dealing with that is a very interesting thing as a company, but also when we actually control a shoot, there are challenges. So talking with the ETC team and other people who are trying to standardize roles and standardize operation, like that will be a helpful step for that. But I'm just curious for you guys, what you see, how can we make this less challenging, and what are sort of like first steps into that as we're only a couple years into this?
Oh, how can we make this less challenging? It's just more education. I mean, and it really is the initiative of users to actually educate themselves and make resources available. I was really grateful to Cassidy and Arri for allowing me to come in, because then I met Sam, and then I met you, and now I'm here. And it was my initiative that started that for me, and my interest in this technology and thinking bigger. So I think it comes down to the individual, but also making the resources available, definitely, which is why the studio in Burbank exists. I also went to the studio at Arri in Bristol in the UK, and it's a full-on, huge, round, massive ceiling. It's incredible. And I went there, and they showed me around. You just have to ask for access to these things, and people are willing to educate you on it.
Yeah, in terms of the future, I've never walked away from a virtual production shoot and thought, oh, that was easy. And I don't think it'll ever happen. I think the stuff that was hard 2 years ago is a lot easier now, but everyone's pushing the boundary every single day. So I think it's just it's kind of a constant cycle. Like, everyone's trying to push the limit as much as they can, and there's always going to be this new thing that you want to achieve and do. But honestly, I think that's where the fun of it is. Like, I enjoy problem solving and figuring stuff out. I think everyone up here would agree with that. Like, that is part of the fun, and that's why we do this. We're pushing the cutting edge, and it's I think it's a cool industry to be in right now because of that.
Well, I think that was a beautiful sentiment to end this on. I want to thank our incredible panel here, and thank everybody who stuck with us through the whole thing. Like I plugged before, we have a space in Burbank. We have our metadata plugin available for free, and we would love to talk more with anybody who is interested in getting more into this. And any plugs for you guys needed?
Check out Voluminous Studios. We're on Instagram. We have a website. We have a LinkedIn. We'll be offering Unreal training within the next 6 months. So we'll be publishing some training videos and have some available online for people who are interested.
My Instagram is @thomasmoffat. And my website is sarah-thomas-moffat.com. That's the best place to find me. I am on LinkedIn, but I haven't used it in a long time, and I don't use the Facebook. So That's where you can find me. Reach out anytime. And I'm going to be bugging all of you again when I get back to Los Angeles because I want to continue this big time.
Please do.
I think that's the best plug is like what you said also, like visiting other places. I'm on like a peacekeeping tour of LA right now. I was at Nance and at PRG and at Standard Vision. We're all going to visit everyone else's stages, and I'm really trying to encourage that to everyone to like open back up and talk to the community a little bit. Oh, hey, funny. Plug for me is Extra Studios. We're in Hollywood. We are opening a new campus in October, so it'll be a big, exciting sort of opening event that we'll have some publicity on soon, which will be exciting. And as part of that initiative, we're having sort of a campus approach where we're going to be doing a lot of community events and talks and presentations like this. So keep an eye out for that more because we'll be doing more of that soon.
Well, thanks, guys. And thanks to everyone in our amazing audience, and also to AWS, the ETC, Planar, OptiTrack, and all of the sponsors of this beautiful volume. And thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Cassidy.